Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 9th Annual MSU Science Festival and annual celebration of the STEAM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. I'm your host, Catherine, and today I'm joined by Lindsey Harrell from the Chippewa Nature Center. Excited to learn all about Michigan snakes. Just a couple notes before we begin. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. If you're joining us on Zoom, please feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask those questions. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, I'm watching the comments section, so feel free to ask any of your questions right in the comments section, and we'll be sure to answer those at the end of Lindsey's session. So without further ado, Lindsey, thanks again for joining us. We're really excited to hear all about snakes.
All right, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsey. So I'm up here in Midland, Michigan, and just a little bit about myself to give you a background. I studied geography and natural resources at Ball State University, and then I started being an interpretive naturalist for the DNR in Indiana and then in Colorado, and now I'm here at Chippewa Nature Center where I'm an interpretive naturalist full-time. And one of my biggest and most important jobs is taking care of our animal ambassadors. So an animal ambassador is an individual of a species that we use to educate about that species for conservation. So we have a toad, a box turtle, and 3 different species of snakes. And we all use those in hopes of furthering conservation for them. So you will see 3 of our snakes today. We do have permits for them at the visitor center, and a lot of times people wonder if we live capture or if we breed them. We don't breed, but we do get our snakes from breeders. So I know that's a question that often people have, so I thought I might lead with that. So we're talking about snakes today, obviously, the ones that live in Michigan. And there's 18 different species in Michigan, and they all have certain things in common and certain things that set them apart from other species. So I'm going to start off by talking about the 3 things that they have in common. And to help me with that, I have our first education or animal ambassador that I'll pull out, and it's a gray rat snake. So I'll go ahead and get her out. All right. So, and this is her first program, actually. So welcome. So obviously we need to talk about that tongue flicking. This is Gray Rat Snake, and she has a beautiful black tongue. So right now she's checking out everyone at home, checking out the camera with that tongue. Snakes have a nice forked tongue that helps them take in their surroundings. So snakes use their forked tongue. Here's a bigger one for you. They stick it out of their mouth and they wiggle it around to pick up molecules out of their surroundings in the air. And they flick it back into their mouth where there's an organ on the top of their mouth called a Jacobson's organ. And the Jacobson's organ helps to process those molecules and tell them what they're smelling. They do have nostrils, however, they don't pick up as much odor as their tongue. So they really rely heavily on that nice flicking movement. Another great thing that these snakes share with their cousins is the fact that they have scales all over their body. So the scales are the same material as your fingernails, so it's nice and hard and durable, so that they don't necessarily get jabbed or pricked by anything in the wild. They do have to shed every so often, so the snakes here shed about every 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how much they eat and how their humidity is. So they will shed their scales all at once. And it kind of looks like a big old tube sock once it's over. And you'll notice she is really trying to move around. I was hoping she would wrap around me because these snakes, this species in particular, is really good at climbing. They're an arboreal a more arboreal species. So anytime I've seen these guys, they like to live in southern Michigan. They're either going to a tree or coming out of a tree. So they like to go eat anything they might find in a nest, maybe a squirrel, maybe a bird egg. They're great at scavenging in those treetops. So the next thing I wanted to address is the fact that there are no limbs to help them climb the tree. So snakes, while they don't have arms and legs like us humans, they have a lot of vertebrae and ribs. So they can have up to 400, depending on the species, 400 vertebrae and ribs in their body. That's a lot. Just paint a picture. We have 24 in our body. So these animals are great at using their muscles and their ribs and their vertebrae to move around and do anything they need. Being limbless or not having legs or arms also helps them to stay stealthy. So if you've ever thought about being on a hike or maybe walking around your garden, when you notice a snake, is it because you're hearing it or are you seeing the movement? Most often when I'm out walking around, I notice a snake passing in front of me. Sometimes I'll hear a leaf rustle and then I'll look over and there's a snake, but a lot of times they are very quiet, and that's because they're not moving all around with their arms and legs. They're just slithering in between over things very quietly. So this is Gray Rat Snake. Thank you, Gray Rat Snake, for helping us talk about limbs or lack thereof, forked tongues, and scales. So the next species I want to talk about, we don't have in person for a pretty good reason. We would have to have special insurance and all sorts of bells and whistles to be able to have this species. You might know what I'm talking about. It's our Massasauga rattlesnake. Oops. Let's go ahead and share my screen so I can show you. We're going to talk about the Eastern Massasauga now. There we go. Oh, that's not the one I wanted to share. I'm just showing all of my tricks. Here. We've been doing Zoom for so long. Let me do something really quickly.
While Lindsey gets that set up, I just want to remind everyone, feel free to ask any questions that you have along the way using the Q&A function if you're joining us on the Zoom webinar, or if you are joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to ask your questions in the comments section. We'll get them to them at the end of the session.
All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and share the screen that was first up. There we go. There we go. I've had my dual monitor on. I can computer, I promise everyone. Back to our Eastern Massasaugas. So these are the only venomous snakes that you're going to find in Michigan. They live in the lower peninsula, and they have very distinct features that set them apart from other snakes. So they have their scales, they have their tongues, and they don't have limbs like everyone else. But they also have these special pits on their face. So between their nose and their eyes, they have what's called a thermal pit. And that helps to detect heat. So when these guys are hunting, they can pick up on that mouse's heat to see where they need to strike to inject their next adaptation that's very special. It's venom. So they'll pick up the heat and they'll smell with their tongue, and then eventually they will calibrate and strike their food. The venom that is injected into the animal helps to kill it, and no way to put it nicely, so that it can eat it without the animal fighting back. Gray rat snake that you just saw has a different method of hunting. So gray rat snakes and the other snakes we see have a constrictor method. So they will wrap around the prey to incapacitate it, whereas the rattlesnake, the only one in Michigan, uses venom. So a lot of times, unfortunately, these snakes are killed because there's a lot of fear that goes with them. The fatality of a bite is very low. If you're a healthy individual that happens to get bitten for whatever reason, usually you're fine. You should always seek medical attention. I will say that, just be on the safe side. However, oftentimes people are fine. But because of that fear of being bitten, people will tend to, unfortunately, kill these animals, or they'll kill snakes that might look like it. So the other species that we talk about tonight are going to be species that kind of look like these snakes, but I'm going to teach you ways to tell the snakes apart. So a big characteristic to tell this is a venomous snake is by that, if you look at the right picture, how it's all curled up, on the back of the snake, you're going to see what looks like little bow ties, or they look like game controllers for like a PS or PS2 or a Xbox. They also have very fat heads, nice big triangular heads that set them apart from other animals or other snakes. So this is our Eastern Massasauga. Also, you'll notice that in the left picture, these animals I like to call them the chubby snake. So they're shorter and they're a little bit wider than a non-venomous snake. So they're a more stout species. Eastern hognose snakes tend to be mistaken for these animals. You'll see I do have a Massasauga head on the bottom of the screen there, and you can see versus the Eastern hognose snake, the heads are very different. So the hognose snakes, I like to think of them as the pugs of the snake world. They have a shorter face and they have a little upturned nose that sets them apart from other snakes. They also have that nice banding across the eyes, kind of make it look like a little a bandit of some kind. These snakes also have different, they come in different colors, whereas the Massasauga, really you only see it in the gray and like deep blackish brown. Hognoses, you can find them in this kind of yellow color that you see here, or on the left, and then on the right you'll see more of a tan. They can come kind of orangey. There's a whole rainbow of Eastern hognose snakes in Michigan, so it's pretty cool. But if you look at that nose and that short head, you'll know it's them. They also have interesting defense mechanisms. So you'll see in the left picture, this snake can actually flatten out its neck right behind its head to make it look nice and big. So if it feels like something's coming after it, or if it's feeling threatened, it can make itself look bigger and lift itself off the ground to hopefully intimidate whatever it's frightened of, so that it backs off. These snakes also play dead. So if you've seen on the internet a snake that flips over and its mouth's open and it just is in a very uncomfortable looking position, that's probably an Eastern hognose. These snakes play dead, kind of like a last ditch effort to have something leave it alone. These animals also will vibrate their tail really fast in the leaf litter to make it sound like a rattlesnake, but it's not really a rattlesnake. But that's just, it mimics the rattlesnake so that it hopefully scares anything off. So these guys have a whole arsenal of defense mechanisms, but if you look at that nose and that little short face, you're going to know it's an Eastern hognose. And then our next friend is a northern water snake. So these guys are often mistaken as a Massasauga because they're around water. These snakes usually are in the water or coming out of it, going into it, really close to it. They are, it's in their name, water snakes. So they like to eat fish and all sorts of frogs, anything they can find in the water. Massasaugas tend to like moist areas. They like the wetlands or like to be on the edges of wetlands or in floodplains where there's nice creeks around. So that's where the mix-up comes. But you'll notice on the northern water snake, you'll find that banding on its mouth. You can see it from afar in that left picture, that it's pretty pronounced, and it has more of a checkerboard blotching rather than that video game controller look. So this is the northern water snake, and the older they get, the darker they can be. So from afar, it might look almost like a solid black or brown. All right, so here's our whopping Eastern Massasauga snake again, and I will get our animal ambassadors out to talk about the other species. So I'm going to talk about our Western fox snake first. He is our big guy. Hello, friend. So this is our Western fox snake. And you can see he's nice and blotchy like the other snakes we've seen. He has a pretty belly, and he's flicking that tongue, checking out at his surroundings. So these snakes are found in the Upper Peninsula. There is a variety of eastern fox snakes. They live in southeast Michigan or in the very tip of the thumb. These snakes like to be in the western fox snake in the UP likes to hang out in the pine forest, sometimes open meadows, or places that have been clear cut for logging. They're not too picky in that regard. They're really good at eating mice. And they do like climbing shrubs, not necessarily go as high as the gray rat snake would in the tree, but they do like to climb a little bit. If you've ever been to the nature center, he's a snake that will be the most active and will be climbing all over the place. He's a very active snake. So you'll notice that his blotching is very different compared to that Eastern Massasauga we were seeing, and his body is very long. So these snakes can get up to 4 feet in the wild. I would say he is getting on that end of the spectrum. These days, he has a very healthy appetite. So, and I can actually see, I'm not going to nerd out too bad, but sometimes you can see when their meals digested, you can see it working through their organs. So before I get any accidents on me, I'm going to go ahead and put him away. So this is the Western fox snake. And if you ever see an Eastern fox snake, they pretty much look identical. The blotching is just a little different size-wise, but to the untrained eye, it could go either way. You can easily say, that's a fox snake. And if you're in the Southeast, you can confidently say, that's an Eastern fox snake. So my next friend I'll bring out is an Eastern milk snake. When you go to PetSmart, sometimes you see Eastern milk snakes that are very vibrant and banded with cream, black, and vibrant orangey red. That's not quite what this guy looks like. And I'll get him out so you can see. Hello. So he's more of a burnt orange. This is a color that you'll see in the wild. Or you will see these, sorry, buddy, he's a little more face shy than the other snakes. So you'll also see them in a dark brown and gray. So where the red is on this guy, it'll be a dark brown, and the rest of his body blotching will be a gray color. So these guys are pretty good at climbing too. I found them 6 feet off the ground in little crevices of trees and whatnot. They're not picky at all with their habitat. They will be in forests. They will hang out by the lake shore, sometimes in your garden, sometimes in your basement. So they can find themselves in interesting predicaments. And we do get a lot of calls about these guys. People thinking that they're Eastern Massasaugas. Obviously, this guy you would think that's clearly not. He's red, but the brown version, people can easily mistake them as Eastern Massasaugas. But you'll remember his little head is not very triangular. He's not wanting to sit still for everyone very well. And he's got a nice long body that's pretty consistent all the way through. Rattlesnakes are, again, that little kind of chunky. And their little bellies, if you ever have a chance to see, are very patterned and beautiful. So this is our Eastern milk snake, and his eyes are red. You're not going to get that with an Eastern Massasauga. And you'll notice also that all of our non-venomous snakes in Michigan do not have that cat-like pupil that the rattlesnakes have during the daytime. They all have big teddy bear or puppy dog looking eyes instead. So if you can see that on one of these snakes, then you'll definitely know that it is not a rattlesnake. All right. So I found him climbing in his cage on a tree branch. So he is in a mood to climb today. So we'll go ahead and put him away and finish up talking about how you can help snakes at home. Good job, little snakes. We have heavy duty containers for that one. So I'm gonna share my screen one more time. So there we go. So there's that Eastern Massasauga again, just for another reference. Okay. Is it freezing? Oh, perfect. Looks like I'm slowing down a little bit. Okay, so stay there, computer. So how can we help snakes at home? Well, keep learning. The more we understand about things that we're not too comfortable with, or if we're absolutely fascinated, we can go further into that subject. We can teach others about the subject or help yourself feel more comfortable with that subject as well. So my favorite field guide to use is Amphibians and Reptiles of the Great Lakes region. It is written by two researchers that have been studying reptiles and amphibians for a very long time. Jim Harding and David Mifsud are wonderful people in the field, and this is a great way to learn about where the animals live, what they do, their breeding habits, how some of them look like other snakes, just like we were talking about earlier. And it goes into salamanders and frogs and toads and skinks. So if you would like that, that's a wonderful resource. I also I Don't Like Snakes. It's a really good book about teaching about snakes, and you can read it as a family. And if you want to go deeper into it on the web, the DNR and MSU Extensions always has really good information. And the Department of Natural Resources, if you still feel shaky about what to do about rattlesnakes, they have a whole page dedicated to what do you do if you encounter one, what do you do if you're bitten by one. All that is very helpful to use as your resource. Okay, and let's see if old computer, I don't know what it's doing. Okay, so there we go. All right, so another thing you can do if you want to go even further past all the researching on your own or just reading for fun about these animals, and you want to help collect information, you can easily do that using Michigan Herp Atlas. So this is a website that hopefully I can bring up. There we go. So this is the website. There is a note at the bottom about how they're having some issues with the map itself. So usually this is an interactive map where you can pull up different species and see how long it's been since there's been a sighting or how recently there's been a sighting. So you can dig into that, but there's also a mobile app that you can download to your phone. And these are all the instructions for it. And it'll walk you through how to bring it up. So when you download, you're going to have this screen and you'll type in all the information, and then this will pop up and you can put your coordinates, what you're seeing. It's possible to upload pictures. And this helps researchers see the prevalence of the animals. How often are we seeing these guys? Because it can be really hard to track these guys down. And like mole salamanders, for instance, a spotted salamander, there's a migration for them. So, or if there's a rare turtle, like a spotted turtle that can, and you see one, that's amazing, and report it as much as you can. So if you don't want to go the Michigan Herp Atlas way, there is always iNaturalist as well. So if anyone's used iNaturalist, it's a mobile app. You can do it on the computer as well. If you like to take photography, like heavy duty camera photography, great to upload from the website. Or you can do it from your phone, and basically you upload your picture, your sighting, you put what species you found, other people review it, and it can be bumped up to research grade material. So this helps researchers see what's going on in the natural world and how often it's going on in the natural world. So these would be considered citizen science projects that we can all do at home. And if you are taking pictures of wildlife, try to give them their space. If you notice their body posture is changing, if a snake is stops flicking its tongue and maybe starts bringing its head up in an S curve, that means it's time to leave that animal alone. So we want to give them their space. So with all this research, you can study the prevalence of populations. Snake fungal disease is a disease that's being studied right now, especially out of the University of Illinois. And they're still learning a lot about it, and there's still a lot of questions, but we know so far that there's over 30 species being affected. We know that these snakes have they can have outside lesions, have mouth issues. Eventually, the animal, unfortunately, sometimes can pass away, or sometimes it sheds its skin once and it's a-okay. They can treat it. I worked with a copperhead that they had to put it in a tank and basically give it a nebulizer or a breathing treatment and help the snake overcome its infection. We know that it lives in the soil. And what they're still trying to figure out is how exactly is it getting transferred from snake to snake. So to help understand the populations, they have to do surveys. Well, you can't always do surveys very easily. So that's where citizen science comes in handy. So if we see these animals, we can snap a picture of them, upload them, and give scientists a way to locate these different species and hopefully try and understand this disease and other issues that these animals face, whether it's habitat loss or fragmentation, lots of things. So if I know I said a lot of words and a lot in a short amount of time. So I do have my email up. If you ever want to email and ask questions or about any of the resources I put out there, please feel free. We also have time to talk about the chat. answer questions in the chat. So I'd be happy to do that. I'll go ahead and unshare.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was awesome. And we're running out of time, but we do have time for just a couple questions. And we have a few I want to make sure we answer because they asked way at the beginning. Derek wants to know, do snakes have ears? I want to know too, do they?
Yeah, so they don't have ear holes, but they do have an inner ear. So they can pick up on vibration pretty well. So that's why a lot of times if you go into like our exhibit or other snake exhibits, they say, don't tap on the glass because they can pick up on it. And that's what helps them hunt as well, picking up on that vibration from different things or to stay out of the way of bigger animals.
Someone asked earlier about the Massasauga snake, and they noticed that there aren't any in Ottawa or Kent counties and a couple other counties in Michigan. Do you know why that is?
Yes, I'm not really sure. I've never looked into the historical records of populations, but I do know that a lot of habitat loss is happening. So they like wet areas. Well, humans can't necessarily build on wet areas. So wetlands get drained and they're built on. So that breaks up the habitat and no longer sustainable for a snake to live in. So it's reasons like that snake habitat or snake populations aren't found in certain places.
That's a shame. We have a question from Rihanna. Hi, Rihanna. She asked if you do come across a snake on a hike or in a garden, should you just walk away or stay still? What should you do?
Wonderful, wonderful question. So if you're in your garden and if it's a Eastern Massasauga for whatever reason, I would leave and call. I always tell people to call the DNR if you can, or someone that has experience handling those kind of situations, just to be on the safe side. And if you can positively ID that it's an Eastern milk snake, then you can watch it for a little bit. Usually once a snake notices you notice them, they're going to hightail it in the other direction. Sometimes I will poke its tail and that'll kind of get it to go away. Or yeah, if you see an Eastern Massasauga while you're hiking, I always, the loop is short, I always tell people to turn around and go the other way just to give the snake room, just so you feel comfortable. It's not worth the risk. Usually nothing, they usually just sit there and it's fine. But just to be on the safe side, I always advise people, just if it's a short loop, go the other way or give it enough space and go around.
That's a great question. So we have time just for one more question, and then unfortunately you have to get ready for our next presentation. But Andrea wants to know what a Gartner snake looks like, and compared to a queen snake, are they pretty similar? What are some differences between the two?
All right. Let me see if my I have my handy dandy. I've honestly, so there's different types of garters. The typical one you're gonna see, where you at? No. I don't know if I've ever seen an you say a queen snake? I don't know if I've ever seen a queen snake. But a garter snake is very checkered. It almost looks checkered from afar. They can be either like a very vibrant yellow and green, or they can be a more dull brown with orange speckling between the scales a little bit. The queen snake, I've honestly never dealt with in person, so I wouldn't be so good with IDing that one for you. queen snake, page 271, but 271 will tell us how to do it. This is my job, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Scenes. We are a generalist occupation, so we know a lot of stuff, but it's a fragment of a lot of different things. All right, queen snake. So you'll notice it's a more solid brown on top. And a very pretty checkered bottom, or like racing lines on the bottom. Sorry, I didn't have a more eloquent way of describing. But that book, let me tell you, is great if you want to purchase it. Otherwise, any more questions? Are we ready?
Yeah, I think
I kept you over. Sorry.
It. No, that's okay. Thank you so much again for joining us and telling us all about snakes. I encourage everyone to look up the Chippewa Nature Center, find them on social media, check out their website, keep learning about snakes. So thank you again, Lindsey, and thank you for everyone that tuned in. Be sure to check out the rest of the events tonight and throughout the entire month of April. Next up, we have Biology on Tap. So it'll be live streamed on Facebook as well. And you can also find a link directly to the webinar if you visit our website at sciencefestival.msu.edu. So thanks again, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.